We're in our 5th week of our fall enrichment program featuring the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. And it's been wonderful. I'm hosting 2 small groups, and we are sharing the deep work that comes with practicing. As Christine said, the practice, putting it into work, putting it into our lives, hearing things like realizing it's okay to say no, that no is a complete sentence. Yes. Or no thank you is finished. You don't have to give your excuses. Knowing that when I let go of my need to control other people, I feel freedom. I feel relaxed. I feel released. It's been a wonderful experience so far. I hope you're enjoying it. If you're following along during the class, during the small groups, you'll get an email with a study companion. If you're not, there's some available on the welcome table and in the bookstore. You can pick that up. And also on the welcome table, we have Let Them temporary tattoos. Isn't that fantastic? You can put one on your hand or to remind you as you go through this day, right, to let them. What does this mean? What really is the Let Them theory? And what isn't it? This is about the time when we start to really get into the juiciness of it. For me, it comes down to these 3 things. The Let Them theory, let them and let me, is first practicing the spiritual practice of non-resistance. Not being drawn in to what's happening around us. Not being triggered or hooked by what's happening around us. Just simply allowing what is to be. The second part of it is reclaiming my inner power, feeling my inner strength, knowing my inner worthiness and wisdom. And the third, living my best self. And I say self with a capital S, right? That part of us that is our divine nature, that our human nature lives in service to. That divine nature, which you may call the Christ consciousness, your better self, spark of divinity, whatever that is for you, living life from that. In her book, The Let Them Theory, Mel says this, because right now we're getting into the part where we're starting to talk about friendship. We're starting to talk about relationships and connection. And she says, I do not want you to use the theory to blow up your friendships because someone else is not responding as often as you want them to. Friendships are not tit for tat. Do not keep score. Reach out to people because you want to, but don't expect a response. How quickly or often someone responds is not a sign of how much they care about you. It's more likely an indication of how overwhelmed they may be. Everyone has a ton going on, and 99% of the time, you have no clue what's happening, what someone else is dealing with. So, with friends especially, don't judge when you don't hear back from them. Assume good intent. So the Let Them theory is not about pushing away relationships. Let Them is not about dropping friendships. It's not about, whatever, I don't care. Right? It's actually releasing the judgments, the jealousy, the anger, and the resentment. Because if you're saying, I don't care, but you're feeling any judgment, any jealousy, any anger, any resentment, it's a clear sign that you care very deeply. Yes? Yes. So the Let Them theory begins with a release, a letting go of those things that we are hooking ourselves to. The Let Them theory is not about blaming other people or other situations for your experience of life. Right? It's about being candid with yourself. What's mine to do? What's mine to own? And then taking responsibility for you. The Let Them theory is not about the idea or the desire to control another person, to be right, to have them agree with us all the time. It's really learning to grow. It's learning and growing through curiosity and understanding. Because through this, we can create a healthy sense of self for ourselves, healthy connections, and healthy relationships. Relationships come and go, yes? There are times in our life when we had friends when we were younger and we have different friends when we're out now. And Mel calls this the great scattering, right? Because there's different phases in our life. At one point in time, we were single and we had single friends, yes? Then one time, two of those single friends got married to each other, and the dynamics changed, didn't they? Then when you're married and the first couple to have kids, all of a sudden, things start to shift again, don't they? Maybe they moved to a new city. Maybe they got divorced. Maybe they're empty nesters. They're getting older. They're downsizing. They're retiring. All of these life events, and any life event that comes your way, has an effect on our relationships, can have an effect on those relationships. Now, from a human perspective, she breaks it down into 3 components. The first one I want to talk about is timing. Whatever chapter we're in right now, what phase of those that I just read off are you in right now? What did you recently experience? And did you notice a shift in your relationships? When you move to a new place, you meet the neighbors. You find out who's around you, and you start to develop and form friendships. We used to go to a friend's Super Bowl party every year. It was a wonderful party. We all had fun. And then all of a sudden, we had a 2-year-old, and we brought our 2-year-old. And the dynamics of a 2-year-old at a Super Bowl party completely changes things, yes? And so that activity shifted. The second thing about relationships is it has a lot to do with proximity. And that is, how much time are we spending with each other? How much time are we physically together? Now, if you have kids, like I do, these are called soccer, football, baseball, dance. And every sport or every activity we would get with the soccer parents, we would get with the football parents, and then shift to the baseball parents, because those are always the same thing, or the dance parents. And then something happens along the way, right? One of the dancers graduates, and the dynamic changes again. I have the theory that for young parents or parents of young kids, the kids actually drive our relationships. We have no choice in the matter. Right? We're going to their games and their activities, and then we're meeting people around them and forming some sort of partnership or some sort of friendship there. The third pillar for relationships is what we call energy. That is, we have some bond, we click. Right? There's some energy that works for us, and sometimes that energy shifts, and so our relationships shift as well. Through all of that experience of life, Mel talks about this one thing. She says, the mistake that we made is we start to obsess over what is wrong. We start to obsess over what is wrong in the relationship. What is wrong with, all of a sudden they're married and we never see them again. Right? And that good friend of ours, they're now off with their significant other and I'm left in the dust. We're geared to focus on what's wrong in life rather than just simply focusing on acceptance, non-resistance, accepting just what is, rather than focusing on kindness or admiration for the other people. We are focused on what's wrong. In the book, she has a whole section entitled, I Was Horrible. I don't want you to raise your hand. But I think we've all been there at one point in time. There's like a page and a half of how she was horrible. You can read about that. But what I want you to hear is this. If I had the let them theory back then, I would have been able to let them be friends. I would have been able to rise above the situation. I would have taken responsibility for understanding and processing my emotions in a healthy way, like a mature adult. But at the time, I had no idea how to deal with my emotions or what I was feeling. It all felt like a personal attack. They became the villain in my story. Why? I'll tell you. It's easier to blame someone else, to sit in your anger, than it is to take responsibility for yourself. And that's our human reaction, right? We tend to sit in our anger. We tend to stew in our judgments and in our jealousies. And over time, that develops resentment within us. And all of these are based on our stories, based on the stories that we're making up about what happened, about what they think of me. All of these ideas that are bubbling up within us we're holding on to. We're not releasing them. We're attached to these jealousies and these judgments. And that attachment becomes our experience of life. And so it's time to let go of that. That's what let them is about, is letting go of our attachments to our jealousies and our judgments, our anger and our resentments for people and things out there. And then allowing myself to be present to who I truly am. And allow the energy, this is what we call the energy of spirit, right? Divine love that flows, that energy that harmonizes and heals and prospers and lifts us up. Eric Butterworth, in his book Practical Metaphysics, A New Insight on Truth, wrote about this in the chapter of love, and it's called Love from the Divine Flow of a Cosmic Consciousness. As people let down their resistance, they commune with the light of love within themselves. The love flows easily for and through them. They love themselves, and I love myself, only in a transcendent way, in a spiritual sense. Out of this consciousness of self-love and seeing the light of love, then there's a commingling and a beautiful relationship ensues. But it's a relationship that is built on a foundation, on a root consciousness, the divine flow of this cosmic process, on the divine flow of love. That is what this process is all about for me. I'm letting go of my attachment, my wanting to be right, my wanting to control. I'm letting go of what people are doing out there, unhooking myself from it so that I can tune back into that inner flow of love. Allow that inner flow of love to be who I am and live in my life. For it's always there, it's always present. It is the only power in the universe, the only spiritual power, this idea of this flowing energy of love of God, divine isness, whatever you want to call it. There is no other power out there except for our shutting out that power within us. So here are 5 tips for mastering adult friendship. Are you ready?
Yes.
Are you ready?
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Tip number 1, commit to curiosity. Be above the line in curiosity. Be above the line of telling stories. Because stories change us. The stories that we hold in our mind change us. So if you're going to hold a story, you might as well make it a good one, yes? Curiosity, then, creates a different story within us. I can be curious about what's happening with another person. I can be curious about what's happening within me. And curiosity creates a path back to self, back to my true self. So in curiosity, I commit to every interaction is an opportunity. Even though it seems threatening, even though it seems frustrating, even though it seems angry, even though there's resentment building up within me, it's an opportunity for me. And if I use curiosity, I can unwind that story. I use curiosity to commit to growing my self-awareness, growing my emotional intelligence, growing to my sense of self, and moving and living in being that self in my everyday life. And with curiosity, I commit to the idea of noticing when I or when they are being judgmental, jealous, angry, or resentment. Recognizing when I become blaming and defensive. And then shifting the story into something new. Tip number 2, commit to accountability. Take responsibility for your actions. Apologize for mistakes. Make amends when needed. But be above the line in accountability. Make sure you are taking accountability for yourself. Don't worry about the other person. That's their job. Tip number 3, source your approval, your self-control, your security from within, not from without. See, so often we're looking for other people to give us validation, yes? We're looking for other people or other situations as our source of security and safety and goodness. But all of that first comes from within, from that energy that's always present. That's why we call it source. That other name for God. For God is our source, the one power, the one presence. And as I tune into that, then I am drawing upon my source of my being for my own sense of well-being, for my own sense of approval, for my own sense of knowing my self-control and my power within me, for my own sense of knowing that I'm safe, I'm whole, I'm present. Tip number 4, commit to self-candor. This is a big one, everyone. Self-candor, saying what is true to you, telling the truth to yourself, getting back to your sense of self. How often when something happens do we sit around and start thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Well, I did it because, and then we have 5 different reasons why it was okay to do that. We start to justify our actions. Be candid with yourself. Be honest with yourself. Tell yourself the truth and get back to your sense of self so that you can live that sense of self in life and be a person to whom others can express their true self to you. And tip number 5, be generous. Be generous to yourself. The let me part of it sometimes seems selfish, but if you're doing it in a way that's very generous to yourself, that's lifting you up, that's refreshing you, that's bringing you back to your presence, bringing you back to your spiritual strength, then it's not selfish. It's actually very generous to other people when you show up that way, yeah? Because when I don't show up that way, you know what happens? Hey, you don't have to agree with me. Maybe true. Your thoughts and your stories about others. Be generous about your thoughts and your stories about others. Be generous in how you look at other people and hear other people. Remember, 99% of the time, we don't know what's going on in their life, let alone what's going on in here. So be generous with yourself and be generous with your stories about them. Tiffany and I were driving right around here, and there was a car behind us that was really anxious. And honking the horn, there were stop signs, there were 3 cars in front of us, honking the horn. We went to the next stop sign. They got on the curb, and they started trying to drive around us, and then they found the giant tree that's sitting there in front of them, so they stopped. They were honking the horn, and of course, if you experience that in your neighborhood where there are kids, what do you feel? Angry. Oh boy, there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of name calling in our car at that point, right? We turned right, and they went on straight. And what the thought that came to me, what I'm going to believe is that they have a dying person in their car, and they're trying to get past us so that they can get to the hospital. That's the story I'm going to hold. Because any other story would have been, me being angry and resentful and frustrated about that for the rest of the day, and then talk about it at church. Be generous with your thoughts and your stories about others. Be generous with your words and your deeds. Be generous. So here are the 5 tips. Commit to curiosity. Commit to accountability. Commit to source as your approval, control, and security from within. Commit to self-candor and commit to being generous. And here's the key to all of it in a relationship. Go first. You go first without any expectations. Remember, a relationship is not tit for tat. A relationship is not keeping score. A relationship is being generous with one another, understanding when things aren't going well, and being a comfort or stepping back when they need alone time. A relationship is something where people can, blow you off, and you don't build up resentment around it. And when you blow them off, you apologize and you take accountability for it. You go first. And don't expect something back in return, for they are not your source of happiness, love, and joy. God is. that indwelling spirit, that idea, that energy that flows is always present, and it's always there, available when we are open and receptive to it. You can master adult friendships, even when you're not close to each other, even when the energy shifts, even when something happens between you. And I have the proof. My mother is 96 years old. At age 14, she met her lifelong friend, who I call my Aunt Claire. Claire is 95 years old. Yes, they're both still alive. Claire lives now up in Shasta. My mom lives in Southern California. And they have been lifelong friends forever. They have gone through all of the struggles. They've gone through all of the situations, all of the stories, all of the things. And the reason they're such good friends is they didn't let any of that get in the way. We went recently, my mom was here, she wanted to see the neighborhood that she grew up in. She grew up in Willow Glen at age 14. So we drove down the road, I think it's Richards Avenue in Willow Glen, and she lived on the second to last lot. There was an empty lot, and then there was a dry creek. It's called Dry Creek. She and Claire played in there all day long, all night long. The two of them were inseparable. So we went there, and we noticed, well, that's the address, but there are 3 new houses. There's a fence and buildings on the other side. There's no creek. So I looked it up. They had filled in the creek. They had built new houses. They used to be covered in fig farms in the area. And now those are all gone, of course. And so she just looked at it and said, okay, my curiosity is satisfied. And she said, you know what? I'm going to write Claire a letter and tell her our story. Because that's how 96-year-olds communicate. They actually write letters. Does anybody know what writing a letter is? Yeah, my kids know nothing about that. There's no texting. It's actually hand to paper. Since she was 14, so you do the math, a whole bunch of years, has maintained this relationship over time. By those 5 tips, by taking responsibility, and by looking beyond the situation that's there. Let's move to our affirmation. I'm going to read our affirmation, and then I'll invite you to affirm it with me. I release my need to control my relationships and allow them to show up moment by moment. I breathe into my sense of self, and I am grateful. Would you affirm that with me together? I release my need to control my relationships and allow them to show up moment by moment. I breathe into my sense of self, and I am grateful. And so it is. Rumi once wrote, be a lamp, or a lifeboat, or a ladder. Help someone's soul heal. Walk out of your house like a shepherd. And as you do, you will master your friendships. Let's take this into our time of meditation and affirmative